Welcome to this special coverage on Qnews. I'm Henny Saif. Cairo reaffirms Palestinian self-determination on the June 4th, 1967 lines, with East Jerusalem as its capital. As reports from Gaza cite deadly incidents despite a ceasefire and the United Nations urges an irreversible two-state path. We also turn to Damascus, where Syria warns that continued Israeli strikes risk wider escalation, while Denmark signals interest in lifting sanctions and supporting recovery. Welcome back. Egypt says Palestinian self-determination and an independent state on the June 4th, 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital is a historic right, not just a political demand. In a statement marking the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, Egypt's foreign ministry said Palestinian self-determination and statehood on the June 4th, 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as the capital is a historic entitlement backed by international legitimacy. The ministry said Egypt will continue close coordination with the United States and regional partners to ensure full implementation of President Donald Trump's peace plan and advance its related mechanisms in a way that preserves Palestinian rights and supports regional stability. Egypt's House Speaker Hanafi Gebeli says Egypt's efforts helped secure an agreement to stop the war in Gaza, rejecting any plan to divide the Strip or displace its people. Speaking at the opening session of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Union for the Mediterranean Forum and the Summit of Speakers, El-Gebeli said Egypt's intensive efforts culminated in an agreement to halt the war in Gaza. He stressed Egypt's firm rejection of any attempt to partition the Strip or forcibly displace its residents, warning against measures that would undermine Palestinian rights and regional stability. Medics in southern Gaza say an Israeli strike killed 2 children on Saturday as near-daily violence continues despite a ceasefire that began on October 10th. Doctors at Nasser Medical Hospital say 2 boys were killed in an Israeli strike in Gaza on Saturday. Their uncle said an Israeli drone fired on the brothers, aged 10 and 12, as they gathered firewood for their father, who was previously injured and used as a wheelchair. At their funeral, witnesses said the father broke down as he held one child's body. The Israeli military did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Gaza health authorities say at least 354 Palestinians have been killed since the ceasefire began, while Israel says 3 of its soldiers have been killed by gunfire in the same period. Amnesty International says Israeli authorities are still committing genocide in Gaza, accusing Israel of fresh attacks and restricting aid access despite the ceasefire. Israel has repeatedly rejected genocide allegations. In a statement, Amnesty said there's no sign Israel is taking serious steps to reverse what it called the deadly impact of its actions in Gaza, and accused Israeli authorities of continuing policies that restrict humanitarian aid and essential services. The group said recent Israeli strikes hit parts of southern and central Gaza, including areas it says should be out of bounds under the ceasefire terms. Gaza's health authorities say hundreds of Palestinians have been killed since the ceasefire took effect on October 10th, while Israel says 3 of its soldiers have been killed by gunfire in the same period. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says Palestinians have the right to dignity, justice and self-determination, urging renewed momentum towards a two-state solution. Guterres said the Palestinian people's rights to dignity, justice and self-determination must be respected, arguing those rights have been violated over the past 2 years. He reiterated his call to end what he described as the illegal occupation of Palestinian territory, and again urged irreversible progress towards a two-state solution, with Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and security. UNICEF is warning that worsening malnutrition as winter sets in is putting children's lives and health at risk in Gaza. UNICEF says malnutrition is worsening in Gaza and could become even more dangerous during the winter, threatening children's survival and long-term health. It said nutrition screenings found around 9,300 children under 5 suffering from severe acute malnutrition in October. UNICEF urged all parties to open crossings into Gaza and allow humanitarian aid to enter through every possible supply route.
The situation is critical. We risk seeing a massive spike in child deaths, not only neonatal, but also infants.
And for more on the situation in Gaza, we're joined from Cairo by the international relations expert, Mr. Mohammed Al-Yemeni. Welcome, Mr. Yemeni, to Qnews. If Washington's plan is the reference, what adjustments are needed to do
Greetings to you and your dear viewers. As was respected to the plan of President Trump, it was in the beginning a realistic one, and that was helped by the moderators from Cairo and Al-Doha to have a ceasefire and stop such megathers committed day and night by the Israeli occupation forces. As with respect to the plan that goes coincide with the international law or its articles, with respect to the international law, due to the violation and aggression on Gaza, the International Criminal Court and the International Just Court issued resolutions that is related or was under the international law by name it genocide and ethnic cleansing. But such a plan came even for the people in Gaza to have some sort of relief. The other thing, what is the fate of just a plan? We need to clarify 2 points. Firstly, there is an American force within the Gaza Strip, and the second point, an international force, as we all know that this point received a reference, a consensus within the U.S. administration with the Israeli occupation with respect to all its points. These points are meaning that the American existence within the Gaza Strip on one way to help Israel to eradicate the Hamas movement, and on the other hand, that Israel is trying to please Donald Trump along with the US administration. This one part. The other part is that the fate of just the plan is still vague. Why? As Israel still from one time to another is violating some of violations. Right after the ceasefire deal, we've witnessed several violations in the Gaza Strip. Lately, some martyrs, either from women or children. This is one hand. From the other hand, the circle of analysis within the Gaza Strip, fortunately, I've witnessed and followed up that the UNRWA says that has a lack of story that is related to the plant or Israeli reluctance within its storage, tons of the food stuffs along with medical stuff, and all it is required for the Gaza Strip or for the Palestinian people in Gaza is needed, but is totally refrained by the Israeli occupation. This is one point, and the other point, the Israeli occupation isn't very much in favor of entering all the agreed upon quantities as agreed by the plan, 600 truckloads, but it's only 150 truckloads is entering. So it is very minimum in the Gaza Strip. Besides, the infrastructure, as we are approaching the very harsh winter as we witnessed,
yes, well, Mr. Yamani, we will be talking about the aid that is definitely necessary for the winter season, but there were reports of hundreds of civilians being killed during the ceasefire that started on October 10th. Now, what is the fastest credible way to verify these incidents and ensure accountability?
It is a very pivotal and significant question. As we've warned this many times, as we said through the deals, who is a real guarantor? Either the United States or the moderators, or all of them are participant in the guarantee, as it has a very great impact. The great influence upon the Israel, the US administration and Trump that pushed Netanyahu to agree upon. And we've spoken about this previously. As you are talking about a specific crisis or a specific violation culminating by the martyrdom of hundreds of the people in Gaza previously, this comes with a green light by the United States. And for the occupation to come back again, such a violation and exploitation or provocations are or against the Islamic resistance, meaning Hamas, in order for Hamas to breach anything, in order for the Israeli aggression to come back in full, as we've witnessed previously started by the October 8, 2023. I think that Cairo, along with its communications with the very effective actors such as the United States and the relevant bodies within such an agreement for Israel should stop such an aggression if you wish to complete such a plan.
Yes, well, Amnesty does point out to grave abuses, and Israel rejects the charge. So what independent fact-finding model could be established that could record the policymakers, all these really horrific accounts that policymakers will accept?
Unfortunately, Israel has a security coverage, as we already mentioned it upon the aggression's beginning, and is getting a great help by the United States. All the provided assistance to Israel, either militarily or on other levels, but we focus on the military level. Why Donald Trump resorted to such a plan and such a deal, as Israel lately was exposed to international isolation along with the ICC's and arrest warrant against Netanyahu and some leaders of the far right wing. This is a very great point to be mentioned to answer your question, but Israel had goals previously and currently. I said, after liberating the Israeli hostages, new pretext will be created for the violation and breaching to take place, which is what actually happened. And the other point, does the United States, under such a deal, had a real desire to achieve the peace as spoken by the American president in the Middle East, as the peace should be prevailed in full along with the Gaza Strip? I see it as it is just a break. I was following previously that Israel had returned into three fronts in Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria. As we witnessed this year and the last year, gradually, which is a very important message that Israel isn't going to fulfill its vows to any conventions. The last questions I've already mentioned or raised some questions that should be answered by the United States. Firstly, the United States of America is turning its eyes with respect to what's happening, the violations and the humanitarian access in a bid that the Israeli occupation to achieve some tactical achievement or just a discussion to be approved upon. The other thing is related to Israel's Netanyahu, as always, searching and pursuing any pretext in order to create a political achievement as he approaching the elections in October 2026. As he is fully prepared for such elections, that is very different compared to previous elections for many considerations that is related to the aggression in Gaza, or rift within the Israeli community.
Definitely. Well, the UN calls for an irreversible two-state track with on the June 4th, 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as the Palestinian capital. Now, what immediate steps would prove progress on the ground rather than making new statements?
New York's declaration that took place in the past September, along with many countries have adopted such a declaration for the two-state solutions, It is acceptable, but the issue is lying on the mechanism to be translated on the ground, as Israel was hindering and disrupting whoever is going through these two-state solutions. And the full absurd in the West Bank for the lack of presence of the Palestinian Authority. There is no talk about the Palestinian Authority nor the two-state solution, despite the United States spoke many times on the two-state solution, but there isn't a clear mechanism that we should build upon a way of such a declaration or announcements.
From Cairo, that was the international relations expert, Mr. Mohammed Al-Yemeni. Mr. Yemeni, thank you very much for joining us here on Q News. And now on to Syria, where in Damascus, Foreign Minister Asad al-Shibani warns that repeated Israeli strikes are driving the region towards escalation and urges firm international action. Syria's Foreign Minister Asad al-Shibani says repeated Israeli attacks are pushing the whole region towards escalation, calling on the international community to take firm action. Now, he was speaking at a joint press conference in Damascus with Denmark's Foreign Minister. Al-Shibani said Israel's repeated strikes are driving the region towards further escalation. He urged the international community to adopt a decisive position to stop what he described as ongoing Israeli attacks. Israel has not responded to al-Shibani's remarks in the account provided. Denmark's Foreign Minister Lars Rasmussen says he hopes sanctions on Syria will be fully lifted, adding some Danish companies are interested in investing as Damascus pushes for recovery. Speaking alongside Syrian Foreign Minister Asad al-Shibani in Damascus, Rasmussen said he wants to see sanctions on Syria removed completely. He added that some Danish companies have signaled interest in investing in Syria. Rasmussen said he discussed with al-Shibani ways to support Syria's recovery efforts and state building as Syria seeks greater international engagement and economic reintegration. For a better understanding, we're joined from Cairo by the International Relations Specialist, Dr. Mohammed Osman. Dr. Osman, welcome to our special coverage here on Q News. What are the immediate escalation risks on the Syria, Lebanon and Gaza axis if reported Israeli strikes and overflights continue near Qnews and Damascus countryside?
Thank you for having me, Hani. Greetings to you and to your audience. Of course, we seem to see rising trends of Israel's rising rates of escalation and violations, whether in Gaza, Lebanon, or Syria. We see one-sided ceasefires in Lebanon and in Gaza, where Hezbollah and Hamas and the other factions are upholding their end of the ceasefire, while Israel, of course, continues to incessantly carry out attacks leading to multiple victims and further destruction. And in Syria, of course, it has been a one-sided affair since the beginning, since the fall of the Assad regime, ranging from land grabs to airstrikes to the destruction of some pivotal military infrastructure. However, what happened in Beijing the other day was a significant escalation, because for the first time, and of course it's a village in the Damascus countryside, when the Israelis carried out their incursion, the locals actually decided to resist the Israelis, and a firefight erupted. And of course, Israel, being brutal as ever, responded in the most gruesome, disgusting manner, and excuse my choice of words over here, because it basically led to a massive bombardment of the village and the death of over 20 people, including women and children. And of course, now the Israelis are signifying that this might be the beginning of a new escalation in Syria. They have changed their rules of engagement, saying that now they will deal lethally with any perceived threat, and also that they might even, according to the Israeli media at least, some elements within the Israeli cabinet or the Israeli government and security establishment do have the conviction that those who carried out the attack against the Israeli occupiers in the village of the Damascus countryside were connected one way or the other with the Syrian intelligence. And of course, this is something that Syria denies. Syria has condemned Israel's behavior. However, it seems that the Israelis now are trying to take advantage of this incident in order to pressure the new Syrian administration further so that they can agree to the conditions of Israel's proposed security agreement, which basically compromises Syria's sovereignty over its southern provinces, which includes even parts of the southern countryside of the capital, Damascus. So unfortunately, this is the situation we are in at the moment, Hani.
Yes, well, how much do these incidents intersect with the 1974 disengagement agreement and UNDOF's mandate? What remedies would be available if boundaries are seriously tested?
The problem sometimes, Hani, is that we do not pay attention to what Netanyahu said and what the Israeli leaders say. Many Arab countries are still speaking about the 1974 agreement as if it's still there. One of the main prerequisites of the existence of any given treaty or any legal document, binding document between both countries, is the voluntary upholding or obligation of each party to that treaty. That's not the case anymore. Netanyahu has declared in December 2024, last year, about a year ago, roughly, he declared that the 1974 agreement for Israel is null and void. He did not say we suspended it. He did not say that we are suspending certain provisions. He said that this agreement is null and void for Israel. So Israel is acting as if it does not exist anymore, and is insisting on a new security agreement instead of that disengagement agreement that could be put in its place, and also it has to include a pathway for future peace and normalization with the Syrian side. This is how the Israelis see it, and unfortunately, this is how the United States sees it as well. Mm-hmm. The United States has reportedly not been very content with Israel's maximalist aims. However, they have not been willing, as of late, to apply any pressure on the Israelis in order for them to at least loosen a bit their stances on or their conditions for any agreement with Syria.
Mm-hmm. Well, Denmark's Minister Rasmussen spoke of lifting sanctions and possible investment. What would a partial or full sanctions rollback mean for Syria's reintegration? How might this affect regional security dynamics if it does happen?
Well, of course, the lifting of sanctions will help the recovery of Syria. It will further enhance the economic stability of the country. The country has been isolated from the global economy over the past 14 years due to the civil war and what happened during that time. Now there seems to be the West is really eager to reintegrate Syria back into the international community because they view this from a geopolitical perspective. They view Syria changing sides, or at least so they believe, from the pro-Iranian, pro-Russian camp to a country that has friendly relations with Europe and the United States is something that needs to be safeguarded. And they do believe that the stability of Syria is directly linked to economic stability, and economic stability can only be attained by lifting those sanctions. The United States has taken very serious steps in that direction, and so did the European Union itself as an entity. So it doesn't surprise me that Denmark, as an EU member, is taking the same direction. However, Syria, of course, the security situation in Syria has to improve first, and the country has to stay united, and the government has to restore control over its territories, whether it's under secessionist movements or the Israeli occupation, before they can actually move forward with any recovery of any sort.
Yes, definitely. And we've seen what's been happening at Bij and other surrounding areas. From Cairo, that was the International Relations Specialist, Dr. Mohammed Osman. Dr. Osman, always a pleasure having you with us here on Q News. As this hour closes, the stakes remain stark. Cairo presses for a just peace, grounded in the June 4th, 1967 borders, with East Jerusalem as the capital, while Gaza counts new losses despite a ceasefire. At the UN, the call is for an irreversible path to two states, dignity and accountability. Now, across the north, Damascus warns of a slide towards wider confrontation as European voices weigh sanctions, investment and serious recovery. The region stands at a hinge point. Choices made now will shape lives and borders for years yet to come. For more stories and live updates, please stay tuned for more coming up here on Q News. I'm Henny Saif. Thank you for watching.